Welcome to the All Things Real Estate Podcast with our very own Josh Barker. With more than 20 years of experience and over 5,000 properties sold, Josh brings a unique perspective to the real estate market. Let's get started.
All right, so thank you everybody for joining us today. It's the middle of August, and I'm sitting here with Chris Heydrich with Heydrich & Company. It's a real estate commercial brokerage here in Shasta County. And first of all, Chris, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Chris in today is that Chris is an absolute wealth of knowledge here in Shasta County when it comes to commercial real estate. In fact, Chris has not only helped me and represented me multiple times, but you're selling something for me right now.
I am.
So, people might find that to be odd, real estate broker having another real estate broker taking care of some transactions for you. But I believe in hiring the best people for the job. And many times when you've helped me in the past, I felt that you were the best person for the job. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And vice versa. And we send people your direction all the time for the residential side, and we appreciate what you do for them.
You bet. Well, thank you. Thanks a lot. So diving right in, no reason to waste any time on this. Mm-hmm. Let's get into some of the numbers right now. So some of the questions that we get is just in general, how is the commercial real estate market? Do you want to share that? Would you like to respond?
Yes. So we typically, I feel like, are always having this kind of constant battle, so to speak, with the national rhetoric and what you're seeing in the national media of, oh my gosh, commercial real estate is doing so terrible. And it for the most part is, right? There is the whole, the pandemic certainly didn't help. The work from home, the lack of wanting to come back because of the conveniences of working from home, the lack of needing to, do any type of commute. So as a result, there's a substantial amount of office space that's available vacant in these larger cities like, Sacramento, San Francisco, San Diego, Chicago, New York, wherever,
Sure.
And for that reason, there's some fear and some concern.
Does that really apply here in Shasta County, in your opinion?
It doesn't. And that's why I feel like we're always kind of having that battle, having that discussion, because a lot of people going, what is going on here in Shasta County? We're always worse than the nation, and it always takes us longer than the nation to get better, right?
Right.
And that happens, and that's not incorrect.
Yep.
But I look at it as when the Great Recession occurred, we did do the same thing before it. Like everybody else, we drank the Kool-Aid that was, oh my gosh, real estate's everything, let's overbuild. And everybody became a developer. And there was a ton of vacant space. Great Recession hit. We had a abundance of inventory in all sectors, industrial, office, medical, retail. And as a result, rental rates came tumbling down as they were trying to fight for the few tenants that were even, confident enough to even move their space or, lease additional space. And values came down. People started losing buildings and properties, and they were hemorrhaging money while they're trying to pay for the overhead of vacant space. And so we had a huge inventory problem. And the benefit of our market being so slow to respond and get back is that we've been taking all of this time to get through our inventory. And so for a long time, there actually hasn't been a large amount of development and new construction.
Yeah. So responding to that, so big picture, what I hear you saying is that, nationally, right, a lot of these commercial office spaces are vacant.
Yep.
Right. And that's because of the work for home situations. People are changing the way in which they operate and run their businesses. And so you have vacancy factors in these major cities.
Yep.
And in some cases, they may have overbuilt too. Mm-hmm. But here in Shasta County here right now, there's not a whole lot of vacancy, which we'll talk about in a minute. Improved vacancy, like improved office space.
Yeah.
But right now, and here in our town, a lot of people go to work.
Right.
And so there's not a whole lot of telecommuting going on here. And so for those reasons, there's demand, right?
Definitely. And even the work from home movement here, which did occur to some degree, I would even say it might be work from Reading from some of the people that even moved up here.
Sure.
But a lot of times the commute here is 15 minutes. I always joke that you can get anywhere in Reading in 15 minutes. Yeah. And so if you can get somewhere in 15 minutes, then it's not so lucrative to say like, okay, I'm going to have an office in my house, because then you got your kids, you've got different things, and you just have, so there's quite a few people who despite moving to Reading or needing to work from home or not needing an office, still say, I'm going to go, get a space downtown. Our downtown in Reading right now is really going strong, very, very hot market, especially for independent, just one party offices, little CPAs or massage therapists or you name it.
Yeah. What does our vacancy look like downtown right now?
So here's the thing. When I said, that there hasn't been a lot of new construction, it's true. The only new construction that has really occurred is on the retail side, where you see like Costco, and across from Costco's project, you have the Churn Creek Marketplace, 175,000 square feet of retail space there. And then also Costco is obviously going through their construction right now for their pad sites that are out there. Downtown, same thing, mostly retail. The retail that you see along I-5 is for the most part underwritten with national tenants, right? So it makes financial sense for them to do that with the national tenants. The downtown stuff underwritten with grants. So there's, quasi-government, funding there. And certainly with the county courthouse, $170 odd, $1 million project that's hopefully getting to completion here shortly. So there are those projects, but otherwise the general private sector construction is what I'm talking about. It really hasn't occurred. But if I tell you that right downtown, we're at historically low vacancy, and we look at it at really we're in like the 6 to 8% range, which historically we were well above 15%, just because for a number of reasons that we can go into if you like. But because retail, the reason why any property, its highest and best use is retail, is because it has high exposure. And so that means you're typically driving right by it. And so if you're driving right by retail and you see something that's vacant or has a for lease sign, then we get calls all the time going, hey, there's all kinds of property vacant. It's vacant everywhere. I'm like, well, you're seeing what's in front.
Right.
What's happening in back or on the second floor or all of those other properties. So office-wise, we have historically low office supply downtown. And our retail is starting to be absorbed in a great way, some of which we've gone public with, some of which we're about to go public with. So
now, are you talking about the development with the apartment buildings up above?
Yes. So there is Market Center, which was there at 1551 Market Street with Apricot Lane in one corner. So there's the public market, the Reading public market that's going to go in there. And there's 13 different spaces. And of those 13, we have 11 done.
11 done?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So
that's incredible. So this is going to be filling up really soon.
It is. Yeah. We're in the process of doing all the designing right now. In fact, I was down in the Bay Area visiting a couple different markets with a couple architects this last weekend, just trying to kind of fine tune really little things like, where should this be? What does the flow look like here? Where is the bottleneck and all that, which is fascinating to see, but really exciting what that's going to bring to downtown. And then with that, there's a lot more reason why different offices, again, businesses are going to move down there. But we've had a number of large businesses specifically move down into downtown because they wanted to be in that more urban setting where they could walk to get coffee and they could, ride a scooter somewhere and have some more of, that feel.
Well, don't forget about us on the east side of town too, right? So I'm off a Hilltop Drive, which used to be obviously more of the commercial side of things, the retail side. And, what's going on in the downtown, of course, is really amazing. When you look at a broader perspective, let's use a couple of different classes for an example. Is there a lot of general office space available for purchase right now?
No, not in my opinion. So on average, just the quantity of space available, we're looking at a little over 200,000 square feet, which might sound like a lot, but to us, it's right around 7% vacancy. And really what we're seeing is because of the lack of construction that has occurred over the last essentially decade, you're getting through most of the kind of higher end stuff. But it provides so much opportunity. So now we're seeing more of, where you on your end with residential, there's a lot of opportunity for people to step in and do kind of flips, right?
Yeah.
House flips.
Sure.
We didn't typically have that as often. Very rarely did you ever build a spec building.
Right.
I mean, that occurred back before the Great Recession, but never since.
Yeah.
Now people have the confidence to pick up buildings and essentially for a flip.
Right.
Not always intending to just turn around and sell them, but you just make them look
There's
nicer.
some upside to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It actually makes financial sense to do that. And there's a number of parties that have been doing that downtown and doing it successfully. And once, a couple people do it, then, it starts to get exciting.
So let's say I'm owner occupied. I'm a doctor in town. I want to have a medical office space for myself, or let's say I'm a chiropractor, or I'm a, real estate broker, or, none of them are expanding right now, by the way. But generally speaking, right, if you look at people that want general office space, could they buy a building right now that's not downtown, that would be just, in general around the county?
So there are a couple properties that we'll joke about in our office saying, man, if I had 3 more of those, I could sell them.
Right.
And it's not always you say that just kind of anecdotally as you're standing around the water cooler, so to speak, but that's kind of the environment that there is right now. Obviously, there's an assumption that the price is fair market and it's appropriately priced.
Of course, yeah.
But for the most part, if there's a good quality property that comes on the market, standalone building, and I would say 5,000 square feet or less, it should sell fairly quickly. Fairly quickly in our industry is typically somewhere in like the 100 days or less.
Okay.
So the residential world, I'm not even sure what your days on market is on average. What is it?
Right now we're saying 85 for the market from when you list it to the day it closes escrow.
Oh, to the closes escrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, our average in commercial it's like 260 or something. I have it in your.
Yeah, we're just better than you on that side.
I don't doubt it. Actually, I've seen your processes. I'm impressed with what you guys do.
No, I'm joking. I think because that's the MLS number. That's not my number, right? So the MLS number, we're much faster than that. But the 85 days on the market is, obviously the volume, right?
Yeah.
So there's 230 to 240 units selling in a month here in residential. Well, there's not that many units obviously selling in the commercial space.
Right.
But if let's say I'm one of those folks that does want to buy that building right now, what would be an average for like 2005, 2006 building?
Yep.
5,000 square feet, good location, good parking, no weird stuff. And it's a standalone building. Is there a general idea of price per square foot on something like that?
Great question. I try to avoid the price per square foot just because we get so into, and we're really based off the income potential.
Totally.
Right. But you're going to be somewhere between 150 and 165 bucks a square foot for something in that range.
Something in that range. Okay, good. Yeah. That's fair.
And then if you go medical, so that's professional office.
Right.
If you go medical, you're going to go another $100 a square foot. For the most part,
because of the improvements and different stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let's talk about financing on that for just a minute. Do you have just a general idea? Let's say I'm going to put down, a total of 20% down on a building, whether it be with SBA for a portion of it or not, but 20% down. Owner-occupied building. Is that even a loan that's available to them?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
And is there a general idea? Rates change to guys all the time, so this is a worthless question almost. But just generally speaking, where do you think the rates would be today? 6.5, 7?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So for the most part, if you're going to do SBA financing and you're going to jump through those hoops, which is worth it, it is a headache for sure, but if you're an owner occupant or you're occupying more than 51% of an existing building and you can do the SBA financing, then you can go as little as 10% down.
Yep.
And if you have, control over your vacancy because you're the tenant, then there's reasons why it might be worthwhile doing that. Otherwise, I'm a pretty conservative person and I typically say go with the more traditional, which in commercial is 30% down, 70% loan.
Yep.
And in those ranges, we're basically seeing, about 6.5 to 7%.
Okay.
And we have the benefit of some fantastic community banks here.
Yeah.
And so there's some, depending upon relationships and just different things that your business is doing, they really will work hard to try to get you the best overall program for your
they want to help you out as much as they can. They want to keep you around.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift over to more of an industrial type of use. I'm thinking the metal building where contractors using some of it in the back or some sort of a supplier type of thing in the back, and then a small improved office space in the front for running their services. You have an idea what those types of buildings might be? Are they available? Number one, are they even out there? I don't see too many.
So those are my favorite.
Yeah.
That is kind of a class that it does fall under industrial. We kind of call it flex industrial. And it's essentially, it's that, 1/3 or 1/4 office right in the front, and then 2/3 or 3/4 warehouse in back. And you see it like out there on Crossroads and Tanqueray, and there's along Prestige, and they're working on a project now off of Airport Road and Rancho. But that, just having been doing this now pre-recession, through recession, and today, that there just never seemed to be a huge amount of vacancy nor concern. In fact, it's kind of funny when you work with some of those owners because they can be so unreasonable, and you're just like, oh, God, you just never really knew what happened, did you? It's just like good. That's why that product type makes so much sense. And I highly recommend it personally as an investment style because the highest and best use, it could be a real estate office, it could be a contractor, and everything between. There's Reading Countertops is out there selling countertops, and so you can always find a tenant. Right now, it'd be very difficult to find one if you wanted to buy one, almost impossible. There's only very few available for lease. Historically, after the recession, rents for those types of buildings were anywhere between like 35 and 45 cents a square foot. And like I said, they were always first to lease.
Right.
Now they're really 80 to $1 a square foot.
Right.
And so they've seen the biggest growth.
Because you can't really build that and spec that right now.
No, it is difficult. But as you approach $1 a square foot, you're getting to rental rates that are going to start to support new construction.
Right.
And I think that's maybe why the project out there at Airport and Rancho kind of stopped a little bit. I don't know. I know that developer also passed away. So I think that.
Okay. Yeah, it changes things. Yeah. So let's talk about debt for just a minute while you're getting a drink of water there. I'm going to do the same. But when you think about one thing that I've been watching a little bit is the Federal Reserve came out and they did some stress testing on commercial paper and said, hey, a lot of this debt is being held by regional or local banks. But they felt that after doing the stress test on it, whatever that means, that even if they were to take catastrophic losses on it, they'd still, because it doesn't represent such a huge portion of the portfolio overall, that these banks would still be solvent, which I was kind of like, well, that's good because I don't want to be in 2008 again, right?
Yeah, right.
But the other side of this is that I know from just talking with a lot of folks that there's notes on commercial properties that are coming due. And those current rates that they have are, really competitive, maybe 3%, maybe 4%. And now in today's rate environment, they're probably on a refinance looking at 6.5% to 7.5% at least if it's owner occupied. If it's non-owner occupied, it could be as high as 9%.
Yeah, I think if you're doing 9, definitely go shop.
Go shop. Good news. Good news.
Yeah.
So my question for you is this. Let's say you are a person. Let me just kind of put you on the spot on this one. So let's just say you own a building right now. Your note's coming due in the next 12 months. And you are thinking, okay, I need to refinance this. Should I wait and see if the rates get better, or should I do it now? That'd be one question to that. And the other question is that do I have to come in with money to do the refinance? Because there's still some ratios that I have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So can you help our listeners understand how that decision process might be for somebody?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and I'll do my best over our podcast without kind of visually. I guess you probably put this somewhere,
sure,
visually as well. But anyway, so I think there's reason not to get too concerned or lose too much sleep. I tend to be optimistic anyway, but if you're getting to the end of it, a traditional commercial loan is amortized over 25 years and typically due in 5. Sometimes they'll be pushed out to 10. But what that basically means that you pay like you're paying over 25 years. And then in the 5th year, whatever you have left, you essentially are forced to refinance.
Right.
It's the bank's opportunity to make sure that they don't undersell their own money by having too low an interest rate, and they have an opportunity to basically refinance.
Yep.
And then also the amortization, as you know, it's all the amortization on the front end is predominantly interest in the payments you're making. And so before you really pay down a bunch of principal, all of a sudden you're forced to refinance, you have to start all over.
Right.
So on the commercial side, you really have no opportunity to really pay off your building if you're doing the minimum payments. You really have to be a little bit more aggressive, unlike residential.
Sure.
But today, because those interest rates for some people potentially could have, gone up significantly, not doubled, but, maybe gone up 3 basis points. That's a pretty significant change in the overall cost of ownership of the property. Hopefully, in that case, let's say it's like an 80% increase, right? If they probably weren't at 3.5, maybe probably at 4, 4.25.
Okay.
And now maybe we're at, whatever, 6.5, 7. So let's just say whatever, 60% increase. Then one thing I look at is what have the rents done at the same time?
Yeah.
And depending upon the sector, there's been a significant increase in rents overall, as I just mentioned in the flex industrial. So there might be a reason why the actual fair market rent is there to actually cover the overall cost of the increase.
Yep.
And yes, you are the tenant, so your business is having to look at that cost. But overall, it shouldn't. When the bank actually goes and says, okay, we have to get a refinance, we have to refinance your loan, we have to go out and get an appraisal. When they get the appraisal, the bank then determines, okay, do we need more cash?
Right. And so when you're looking at it that way, it's like, okay, and the appraisal is designed, if you're owner occupying the building, to help figure out what is fair market rent for the building, because you might be charging yourself more than you should or less than you should, and either way you're biased, right?
Yep.
So get the third party in there to give an idea for the bank's benefit of, okay, what is fair market rent for this building that my customer currently is using, right?
Yep.
And let's just say that the scheduled income on a building is $5,000 a month of rent, right?
Yep.
Now, there's a ratio that the bank's looking at. They want to make sure that your debt service is about 1.3%, or I'm sorry, 1.3 less, right?
Yeah.
Than what the, so essentially 30% less, I guess, is what we're really trying to say.
Yeah.
About 30% less for the debt service than the income that you're bringing in.
Yeah.
Right?
So debt coverage ratio, right? So what the net income that your property brings in, is it able to cover the debt plus a little bit more?
Right.
And so that's they look at wanting to make sure that it has that ability.
Right. And that might be what triggers bringing in cash to do your refinance.
It could be, certainly. I would imagine, I think for the most part, most people are going to find that they're in an okay cash position as far as equity. I'm going to guess.
And that's because you think on the appraisal with the income approach or scheduled income approach, you think that it's going to justify a high enough income.
I do, because if they're refinancing right now, chances are it's a 5-year.
Right.
It could be a 10, but usually, like I said, it was due in 5, and so they're probably doing it now. And 5 years ago, there's a good chance that their rent has increased to a point where there's enough equity that it will be a good cushion for the increase in interest rate, for their debt coverage ratio, which I know are getting somewhat complex. But I think the difficulty is going to be just for the owner occupant to say, okay, well, I'm used to paying $5,000 a month for my own rent for my business, and now I need to pay $6,000.
Yeah, right.
Because I need to have that additional just so that the bank feels good.
Yes.
Or the interest rate has actually gone up. Right. So the interest rate has gone up. So now I actually have to legitimately pay that.
You have to pay more. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But which means you might have to move your rent up too.
And I don't know that it'll be much help, but most commercial loans have a set increase in there at that 5th year. So yes, does it force a refinance? Usually, but technically, is there a interest rate identified in the actual loan, in the note? It normally, not always, but normally. So you might want to just double check, make sure, because it might say, oh yeah, we're gonna, in 5 years we're gonna jump to 6% interest because that's gonna be crazy, and now we're at 6.5 to 7. So maybe that 6% of the interest rate in your loan actually in your note makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So anyway,
so do you see any major foreclosures at all in the future here in commercial real estate in Shasta County?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
I haven't either.
Yeah.
I mean, and I get to ask that on the residential side quite a bit too, and we track that. We use a couple of different sources to track it. And I mean, we know there's some foreclosures out there. I think the last number I checked on it was like on the 180s between anybody that had a notice of default all the way through it's bank owned.
Yep.
There was like 180 that were showing up on the report, right? For all of the county.
Yep.
And I'm like, those are numbers that were very similar to what they were, in 2015, 2016, 17, 18. So it hasn't changed that much in that regard. So I think it's important we just kind of bring this up because I'm hearing this a little bit about the commercial side, but I'm not seeing it. And it sounds like you're not either. But we know why they're saying it. It's because you look at the national market, like we started off this whole podcast with, and we're like, the national market looks bad, right?
Yep.
But it doesn't look, that same fact pattern is not really applying in the same degree here.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
It is definitely fair to say.
Yeah.
Just because if you're concerned about your building, I would even consider holding on to it and leasing it out.
Yep.
Maybe move the office into a smaller space or wherever if it makes sense. But just because there is so little inventory for lease, and there are so many good quality tenants out there looking for space right now, you'll see the overall vacancy isn't changing a whole lot necessarily because it feels like we're just playing a lot of leapfrog. As soon as someone takes one space and someone backfills their other space and then someone backfills that space, and it's just like, oh, I know someone for that spot. And so a lot of what is happening in the commercial world is happening off market.
Yeah. That almost sounds like realtor world too. It really does. I mean, because that's a healthy market is when, you have a seller that's moving into another property, which is part of the challenge right now. That's why the volumes in our market have slowed down so much, is the seller's going, I'm not giving up a 3.5% interest rate for today's rates. You know what I mean? And you can't really blame them. And there's not a ton of inventory to choose from. So it's like, how are you going to get me off my perch, right? I like my house enough and the rate's good enough. I don't want to do anything. But on the commercial side, I see a lot more excitement for the future, and these are the entrepreneurs out there that are really wanting to, make a mark in the world for themselves. And
for sure,
commercial is one of the first steps to get there. So
I think the residential tends to be a little bit kind of first step as far as the 4plexes, 3plexes. We see a lot of that just because there's some comfort there, and I think there's always like a default in the back of all of our minds. Maybe this is just me. It's like, well, if things ever get really bad, I could always move in there.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? So it's always easy to make that be your first kind of investment. But what I think we hear a lot, of course, people start coming our direction when all of a sudden they go, oh, I just cannot take another middle of the night phone call, or whatever it is. Even it's not even, it's like my property manager is telling me that this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, whatever it is. There's not that pride of ownership that normally tends to be there for commercial. You end up having somebody whose business is there, so they want it to look nice. And then they go at 5 o'clock typically. And so you don't get those calls in the middle of the night. You get them the next day.
Man, you're speaking the choir on that one. My wife fired me from property management, so she really did.
Is that one of those like selective incompetence? Like, no, I'm really bad.
I'm
you
really
take
bad.
It over.
Well, actually, what happened was there was a house, the person wasn't paying, and so my wife's like, "You need to go over and talk to them." And so I went over to talk to these folks. And it was a really, really good story, right? So I ended up, the story was so good, I gave them $100. And I get back to the house, and my wife, of course, is saying, so how did it go? And I'm like, it didn't go so well. She's like, what happened? I'm like, well, I say I gave them $100.
They're really
what?
Nice people.
Yeah. So I got fired by my wife, and we hired a wonderful property manager in town to manage all our properties.
Good.
And I can tell you, our marriage has improved tenfold just on that decision alone, because managing stuff can tend to be a bit stressful. You work all day long, you're tired, you get home at night, and then you start getting the calls, about fixing toilets and sinks and fans and lights.
I know.
And those aren't any fun. So for those of you that are still in the trenches doing it, you might want to consider talking to somebody.
Yeah. And we don't do it, but I find that there's no perfect manager out there.
Yeah.
I mean, and I love all the managers I work with, of course, but it's tough. It's a tough job, and there's a lot of turnover there because you just don't ever get a phone call of someone saying, "Hey, by the way, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. Thank you."
Right.
It's either the landlord wondering where something's going on, or is this done, or why didn't I get this check? And then it's the tenant saying that something's wrong, or whatever it is.
It's a fairly thankless profession, but very much needed because everybody needs a place to live, right? Well, this has been a fantastic opportunity to have a conversation with you. I appreciate it very, very much. If folks wanted to get a hold of you directly, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
So my direct line is 530-226-1160, or my email is Chris, CHRIS, at Haedrich, HAEDRICH.com. And those are probably the easiest ways.
Yeah.
Or obviously, through you and whatever else you guys
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely direct in your direction for sure. So, but everybody that's watching today, I want to thank you for your time. Chris, thank you again. Appreciate you very much.
Yeah,
And,
thank you.
Yeah, have a great day.
If you're enjoying the All Things Real Estate podcast, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.